On today's show, the Dallas Mavericks offseason is underway. What are their biggest priorities? I'll tell you what they are in today's Locked On Mavs.
I'm Luka Doncic, and this is Locked On Mavericks podcast.
To the Mavericks, NBA champions. Bang! It's good, and the Mavericks have won the game.
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
Loyalty never fades away.
And welcome. You're locked on to the Dallas Mavericks. My name is Nick Angstadt, media member and NBA channel manager for the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Thanks for being part of the show and making Locked On Mavs your first listen today. The best way you can help us grow the show is to listen every day, leave a 5-star review on any podcast platform you listen to, like the video on YouTube, and comment anything below. Let me know in the comment section what should be the Mavericks' biggest priority in the offseason. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use that code, all lowercase, LockedOnNBA for first deposit match up to $100. And joining me, the offseason efficient, the former post-game prodigy from the great Slightly Biased YouTube channel. What you got for me, Slightly Biased?
Yeah, I mean, I'm feeling good. Offseason vibes. A lot to take in. I was really unplugged. I didn't realize how unplugged I was from offseason stuff during the playoff run until I started to look into it, and I'm like, oh, I have no clue what any team is about to. Like, I was looking at the Atlanta Hawks. I'm like, what are they about to do?
I have no idea. I literally just talked about them on Locked On NBA last night, and I was like, they're one of my most interesting teams. They have the number one pick, and they have this roster where you're like, they could go anywhere, any direction with it. Trey and DeJounte, are they going to just run that back again? But so many different things. The Mavs have less things than the Atlanta Hawks have to figure out, at least. But they still have some things. So we'll go through. I want to talk about what the Mavericks need to do this offseason, what Dallas has. Let's do like the whole offseason preview and like overview. Let's talk about what Dallas needs. Let's talk about some ways they have to acquire players, their trade assets. And then I've got a couple targets, not a bunch, but I've got a couple targets that we can kind of dip the toe into the water of that. But let's start here slightly. The biggest priorities for the Dallas Mavericks. You and I have kind of talked about on this show. They need to acquire another offensive initiator. That's definitely a big target. Reggie and I talked about it as one of the lessons they need to learn from the finals. Is they need one more guy like that. They also need to re-sign Dereck Jones Jr. because you can't take a step backwards with your roster. You finally got the two wings. Another lesson that we talked about on the episode the other day is that they need to learn that you got to have the two dirty work wings. You cannot go into another season without that again. Like last season, 2022-23, they tried to go into the season without that, and it just didn't work. They even tried with like Grant Williams, and it just didn't work in the same way. You got to have the two dirty work wings. And so if you take a step back by not re-signing Dereck Jones Jr. and not replacing him at all, then you take a step back. But between the two of them, which is a bigger priority? To re-sign Dereck Jones Jr. and not take a step back, or to take that step forward and get the offensive initiator?
Definitely the offensive initiator, because I think you could figure out ways to replace Dereck Jones Jr. And whatever offensive initiator you'd be getting would be upgrading Dereck Jones Jr.'s spot in the lineup, you would think, at least. So you would be upgrading there.
That's the thing about like the having your cake and eating it too, because I wrote down acquire another offensive initiator, maybe could replace Dereck Jones Jr. if that player is somebody that can replace him in that way. Like, let's say they get like a Brandon Ingram. That's pie in the sky. Like that's a name out there.
Is that pie in the sky? Really?
I mean, what do you think is pie in the sky?
Like for me, marketing or Mikal Bridges is pie in the sky, but people always people have brought up Ingram to me a bunch. I'm like, I don't think that would work at all. I think that would be a disaster.
But let's say they do. He's a guy that can kind of initiate offense and like also defend probably at a decent enough clip that you're like, okay. Then we maybe have replaced Dereck Jones Jr. Just as an example. That's not like the perfect example of who to get, but that type of a guy could. So yeah, they could try and thread the needle and do both. But yeah, you also, if you add another offensive initiator, and then you at least have Josh Green and Omax in the wings to like maybe replace at least some of what Dereck Jones Jr. did.
Yeah. Well, I think a problem I kept running into whenever I was looking at people to upgrade that 3 spot and to get that third offensive guy is like, okay, if this guy is here to replace Dereck Jones Jr., where's your point of attack defense coming from?
Yes, this is
in the starting 5, because Dereck Jones Jr. has been that guy. PJ can do it, but he's not as good as Dereck Jones Jr. is. Luka and Kyrie obviously aren't doing it. Your center's obviously not doing it. So if you go out and you get like a Brandon Ingram, he can't do that. If you go out and you get, Kyle Kuzma, you circle that wagon again. He can't do that either. So that's when you start to run into issues where you're addressing one need, but then you're opening up another need. And that's where this becomes a very slippery slope. And we've seen this franchise in years past try to address one need while then simultaneously opening up two or three separate needs in the process of doing that. So I don't know. It's interesting. I was telling you before the show, but I think the Mavs are going to do this offseason. Should I just say it now?
Go for it. Yep.
I think it's going to be a very, very boring offseason. Boring. I think they might be one of the most boring teams.
And for the next 25 minutes, we will tell you exactly all the things that they won't do. No.
Well, I mean, there's always the chance that they'll do something. They've always been a busy team. I could be wrong. I could be 100% wrong. They could get LeBron or Paul George somehow, and it could be insane. But I just think for what they have to spend, where they're at, the fact that they're coming off of a finals run, and the fact that this front office with Nico Harrison, this is now 2 of the 3 seasons he's been here where they've made, all 3 years he's been here, they made huge trade deadline moves. But now 2 of the 3 seasons he's been here where they made big trade deadline moves and then had huge second halves of the season afterwards. They know that they can go into the season with what they have and then make the changes if needed mid-season and be fine. Like, they've done it twice.
So we talked about the 2 biggest priorities: acquire another offensive initiator, re-sign Dereck Jones Jr. Maybe you can thread the needle and improve in both ways. Improve point of attack defense was my third one. That was the third one, which you kind of already did mention, because they do need to be better at that. If they were better at point of attack defense, I think that Clippers series would have been easier. I think you would have had more of a chance against the Celtics probably. There's just a lot of areas I think that would have helped a lot. I think their 4th priority is stay under the second apron, which is sort of like an overarching, scheme thing. So the Mavs have, it's like 100. They're at like 179 or something like that in their the amount of cap they have. They're going to be a first apron team. You just don't want to get in that second apron, and that's where like the Suns are and other teams where you're just so restricted to that point. You can't trade multiple players at once. You can't like add multiple players together. You can't send cash out in a deal. There's just a bunch of different things. Eventually your draft picks get frozen and weird things like that. So the 186 million, you got to stay under that. And that's a huge thing. That's a priority. So I think those are the 4 priorities: re-sign or replace Dereck Jones Jr., acquire an offensive initiator, improve point of attack defense, stay under the second apron. If you can get all those things done, oh my God, you've like, Nico Harrison should get like GM of the year or executive of the year. But I think it's gonna be hard to get all those done.
Yeah, you're gonna have to sacrifice some way, I think. Unless Nico knocks it out of the park. I'm sitting there trying to I did a Bleacher Report stream today where I had to make some mock trades for the Mavericks. I'm trying to figure out creative ways to, 3-team, 4-team trades. It's so incredibly hard. And that's why they get paid the big bucks. And we get paid the medium bucks to sit here and talk about it on a podcast.
No, compared to them, it is not medium.
That's true.
They're big.
But we're minuscule bucks. But hey, JJ Redick just paved the way for us. So soon.
Price of living bucks.
Yeah, price of living bucks. We'll take that, honestly, in this day and age. But
JJ Redick did pave the way.
Yep, we'll be there soon. But
the Pistons, give us a call.
Give us a call. Why not? Like, if it's gonna be a disaster anyways, like it'd be entertaining.
Can we win more than 14 games? Isn't that what Monty Williams won last?
I wonder if it was just like, guys, just go do whatever you want. To NBA players, would that get you to like 20?
Listen, we're already paying a coach. Can we just pay you like $1 million? Yeah, you could do that. Yeah.
Sure. That sounds good.
The Pistons hire the lowest paid coaches in the NBA. So those are the Mavs offseason biggest priorities: to re-sign or replace Dereck Jones Jr., improve point of attack defense, acquire that other offensive initiator in some way, stay under the second apron with attacks. A couple other like smaller things. They could extend Jaden Hardy in the offseason. They also have Dante Exum's on a non-guaranteed, and then Gafford can also be extended October 1st. So there's a couple other things to look at. I don't think that those are the top priorities, but there's a couple things to like consider in the offseason. Coming up, let's talk about what Dallas has. What are they starting with? What do they actually have? We'll talk about some of their needs and ways to acquire players. Do that all and more coming up.
I don't believe you shouldn't be here.
Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks Daily Fantasy made easy. All you have to do is go to PrizePicks.com, pick more or less than 2 to 6 players stat projections. So you can pick from WNBA players. You can do baseball. There's all kinds of stuff. It changes probably like by the hour. You have to go check it all the time. PrizePicks.com and use that promo code LOCKEDONNBA. You put down $100 into your account. They will match it $100. You can turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your favorite sports this summer. PrizePicks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Get in the daily action with your friends. Become part of the PrizePicks community today. And now that the finals are over, you've got WNBA, you've got MLB, you've got all kinds of stuff. They even have like Call of Duty tournaments and like a bunch of different stuff on there. You might as well check it out. PrizePicks.com. Download the app. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use that code LockedOnNBA for your first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Thanks everybody for hanging out with us on Locked On Mavs, being part of the show, part of the Raccoon Squad, listening every day. Appreciate each and every one of you for checking out the show. We're all throughout the offseason. You're noticing this is technically a bonus episode of Locked On Mavs we're doing over the weekend because it don't stop. It don't stop. The draft is just in a couple days, which is absolutely wild.
Yeah.
Talking about the Mavs' biggest priorities in the offseason. What Dallas has. I think it's important to like start the offseason. This is what they have, and this is what they're going for. You've got 2 stars under contract, Luka and Kyrie, making $84 million combined. That's just under 60% of the cap. And so also, that number made me realize when people are saying, "Oh, you guys asked," there's too much being asked of Luka and Kyrie. You guys are blaming Luka and Kyrie or giving them too much credit for wins and losses in the playoffs. And like, you know what? They're making 60% of the cap, guys. Like,
Yeah.
There's a reason why there's a lot on their plate and a lot being asked of them. So they've got that. They've got 2 stars lined up. Incredible. Like how many off seasons? 1 off season have the Mavs had 2. 0 off seasons have the Mavs since they got Luka. Have the Mavs had 2 stars like signed up in there that you felt good about and all that. It's kind of wild. Their center rotation. They've got that short up. Don't need a center for once. Andre Drummond's name got posted the other day of like, hey, he may find a new team. And I was like, when's the last time Andre Drummond is not going to be floated to the Dallas Mavericks?
Capella, Claxton.
Don't need him. Nope, gone.
If this were last offseason, man, we would be hearing all of them.
Be feasting. I mean, think about the time the Mavericks were like talking about trading the first round pick for DeAndre Ayton, Clint Capella. I mean, we were deep in those conversations in last offseason. But you've got a center rotation, and honestly, you've got 3 centers making $22 million total. That's incredible. Because you've got and that's 16% of the cap. That's nothing. Lively making 3.6, Gafford making 9.5. Percent of the cap. 3.6%. Not Gafford making 9.5% of the cap. Dwight Powell making 2.8% on that kind of a minimum. And then if you want to add Maxi's making 7.8%. That's $11 million. So that gets you to $33 million for your big man center rotation, that's awesome. Like starting at a good spot there for once.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people who are like, we should get Dwight Powell out of here in the offseason. It's like, why? He's making $4 million. Like,
no point.
He's a completely fine 3rd string center, and by all accounts, everyone loves him on the team, and he's a great locker room guy. Like, why?
He's finally in his right spot.
Exactly. This is finally where he's supposed to be at. So now we want to get him out.
Yeah.
That would be funny if this is now when we traded him and not when he was making like $11 million and everyone's like, trade him now.
Finally, when people aren't complaining about him at all, really. With wings, you got PJ Washington for 2 more years. Feeling good about that one. You got Josh Green at $12.6 million. Then next year, 13.6, 14.6. Like he needs to grow a little bit into that deal, I think.
It's not that bad though.
But it's fine. It's not that bad. You've got Omax Prosper still on his rookie deal, and you've got AJ Lawson on a non-guaranteed. Those are your kind of wings. And then you've got Exum on a non-guaranteed and Hardy and Tim Hardaway Jr. still. So that's the area you got to figure out. You got to figure out your wing rotation and your like backup guard situation. Which one you want to start with first?
Well, wing's the most important, I think.
Yep.
Because of the Derrick Jones Jr. thing. Look, I mean, the way that when you just map that out, there's just such a real chance that this is the same roster minus whatever they have to do to open up the cap space to bring back Derrick Jones Jr. to have them get that mid-level, which would probably be Tim getting traded into some team's cap space. And yeah, I mean, so much. Well, I wouldn't want to say so much, but a lot hinges on Omax and Dereck Lively's progression over the next several months.
which is the same as last year. Last year would be like, if Lively takes a step forward, then this team could do this. And apparently that was they could make the finals. Apparently that's what that was. Isn't that wild?
There's no chance Lively's at Summer League, right?
This year?
I think no chance.
No,
right?
No chance. Too good.
What if they want him to shoot threes or something?
Yeah, well, that would be the one thing. They said in that there he takes like 5 threes a game.
Omax for sure will be at Summer League.
I think Omax for sure will be at Summer League. I don't think Hardy will.
I don't want to go. Yeah, sending a guy, third-year guy is kind of weird.
I've told many people I'm only going if the Mavs get Bronny.
Well, that was one of the big things in my trade thing that I did was like looking around the league. There's a lot of teams that have 4 or 5 picks in this year's draft, which I'm sure those teams do not want to leave the draft with 4 guys, with 4 rookies.
Right.
Not just like because it's a weak draft, but that's just like weird to do anyways, to have 4 brand new players on your 4 rookies on your team. So there's a lot of trade up scenarios for the Mavs that I could see happening. Like the Jazz have, I think, the 32nd overall pick or something like that. And the Mavs next year, they have a Raptors 2nd round pick that is pretty spicy, I think. Like if the Raptors are bad again, next year's supposed to be like a really deep draft. And if that's projected to be a 30 through 38-ish pick, like that's pretty strong. And if the Mavericks want to move up to draft Bronny in an effort to maybe lure in LeBron or whatever the case may be, I could see that happening.
I did the episode the other day with Kevin talking about the Bronny situation and talking about how the Mavs could do that and all kinds of stuff like that. The Mavs after the draft, they can trade their. So here's what the Mavs have to trade, by the way. So here are their assets. You've got Tim Hardaway Jr., $16 million expiring. I think that becomes an asset. You got Maxey making $11 million for the next 2 years. So that one's not terrible, but it's a decent salary that you can move around. Josh Green making his deal. If you put Tim, Maxey, and Josh Green together, that's about $40 million. So if you want to go star hunting and you want to go try and get somebody else, if you want to get a Brandon Ingram, let's say, that's what you do is you combine those players and the picks and see what you got. The Mavs will be able to trade a 2025 after the draft. So a first round pick. So they've got that first round pick. They'll have a 2031 as well that they could potentially move. They have 4 second round picks available to them too, including the 58th pick in 2024. So that one's not that great, but still 4 seconds. They also have $6.9 million in cash they can send out too. So cash considerations. They've got some of those. And
they can swap 2026, right? Or something like that.
I think they can. So they do have some things. So like I saw Bill Simmons today. Bill Simmons, who we love, by the way. We trash Bill Simmons a lot more. Bill Simmons, who we love.
I do love Bill Simmons.
I don't know. He's like, I don't know what the Mavs move is. I don't think they've made all their moves. That's not true. They still can make some moves. They still have some stuff to do. But those are their assets, and that's who they have right now.
I don't know how this narrative keeps getting parroted that the Mavericks have done all their all-in stuff. That's just not true at all. They could do 2 first-round picks and a pick swap and like a couple pretty interesting young guys that is not enough to get. I'll tell you right now, not enough to get Larry Markkinen because that's a name that gets brought up all the time. Nowhere near enough to get him. No. Not enough to get Mikal Bridges because, let's get him out of here because that's a name that gets brought up all the time. But that's probably enough to get Kuzma again if that's something you really want. That's probably enough to get Jeremy Grant if that's somebody you want. Are those guys that I want? I don't know. But, if that's what the Mavericks are interested in doing.
It's possible. I mean, they could. Oh, my God, Zach LaVine. Are we doing that again?
Hey, man, they love him in the front office. That's been rumored forever.
If Isaac was on here, we would take a victory lap on Zach LaVine because, 5 years ago, we said, I don't want Zach LaVine next to Luka. I don't want that to be the second star. And people trashed us so much. How dare you, blah, blah, blah. And now, who wants Zach LaVine?
I guarantee you if Kyrie Irving were not a Maverick, Zach LaVine would be a Maverick right now. I guarantee
they
you
almost
100%.
Did.
Yeah.
They almost made
I promise you if Kyrie didn't just the sky didn't open up and drop Kyrie Irving on the Dallas Mavericks, Zach LaVine would be on the team currently.
Coming up, let's talk about a couple ways the Mavericks can acquire players. There's a couple different ways they can. And then let's throw some names back and forth. Let's talk about a couple targets. Talk about that, all that and more coming up.
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. You're hiring. You know that hiring is one of the most important things. Some people say that it is the most important thing for your business because when you bring somebody in, you want to make sure they're flexible, they have the right kind of skill set that you need, and they can also grow into roles. They can grow into other roles. You can promote them. Eventually, you may be with this person for a decade or so if you hire somebody. So you want to make sure you do it right. LinkedIn Jobs helps you do that. It's not just another job board. They have a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals. Makes it the best place to hire. Gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many qualified candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. Again, linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNBA.
Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks everybody for hanging out with us on Locked On Mavs, being part of the show, listening every day. All right, Slightly. We talked about the Mavs' biggest priorities. We talked about things that they want to do. We talked about their needs, and we've talked about what they have right now with assets and in the rotation. Let's talk about a couple ways they can acquire players. I don't think they're going to sign anybody. I think they have basically they'll have the tax mid-level exception, about $5.18 million, and that can be up to 2 years. If they stay under the second apron, which we talked about earlier, that tax level, if they stay under there, they'll have the 5.18. If they can get under the first apron, which means they offload Tim Hardaway, they offload Maxey somehow and get under that for however they do that, some way. Then they would have the mid-level exception. That's $12.8 million. That's when you're actually talking about you can sign somebody. They'd also have the biannual exception for $4.6 million. And so they could do that if they get under the first apron. But right now, as it is, they'll have 5.18 to sign somebody, and they need to re-sign Dereck Jones Jr. So it's a very difficult spot to be in. I don't think they'll probably won't even use it because they'll have to sign Dereck Jones Jr. Figure out a way. They actually need to shed some money just to find money to re-sign him to stay under that second apron. So that's going to be a very difficult thing. The Mavs have the 58th pick in the draft, so they could draft somebody with that. But I think if they're going to do anything, they've got to trade. And if they sign and trade somebody, so somebody else gets signed and it gets traded over to the Mavericks, that hard caps the Mavericks. And you don't want to do that either. So they're not going to sign and trade anybody either. So we got to take that option out. You tweeted today, it's difficult to, like, the trade machine is not fun anymore. And I know the reason is because you know too much. You know too much about this. You start going through these things where like, oh, well, they're not going to do this because of this. They're not going to do this because of this. Then all of a sudden takes the fun out of it. But that's the way the Mavs can acquire players. It's basically a trade that is not a sign and trade.
Yeah, and well, it really kind of boils down to what. So we think it's going to have to be mid-level for Dereck Jones Jr. because I'm not entirely convinced that's true right now, to be honest with you. Because I don't think NBA teams are stupid. I think NBA teams look at Dereck Jones Jr. and say, "There's no way there's a better place for him to be at than there with Luka." So I'm not so sure if you're a team with cap space. Like if you're the Pistons. Are you like, no, Dereck Jones Jr. is what we need?
Yeah.
Right. Like, I don't know. Maybe the Sixers become interested. Like, there's some actual contending teams with a lot of cap space, which makes all this very interesting this offseason. But I guess it all depends there. Like, if you feel like, okay, the taxpayer mid-level, right? We can get Dereck Jones Jr. for that. We could do like the Bobby Portis thing where we do the 1+1 deal with him and he's making $4 million year one with an option and then he declines it and now we have his bird rights so we can give him, the big extension that he wants. I think that could be in play. I haven't looked too deep into it. I in terms of what teams have which mid-level available to them and which players are out on the market, but it wouldn't surprise me if it does not require the full mid-level for Dereck Jones Jr. at this point. It really wouldn't.
And the full mid-level is $12.8 million, so a year. So it wouldn't surprise me either. But the Mavs still have to make some kind of space in order to keep him, which is why all this is difficult. And we're like, oh, they want to add this and do this and do this. They just don't have a lot of options to do it. They have more options than the Suns do. I did this on Locked On NBA last night. You want me to go through what the Suns have?
Yeah.
Suns are second apron team. They can only trade one player at a time. They've got on their roster Booker, Beal, Grayson Allen just re-signed. He can't get traded until basically the beginning of the season starts. They got Kevin Durant, Nas Little, and Big Body Roddy as their wings, and Nurkic. Those are the only players they have signed. They have the 22nd pick in the draft. They have to re-sign Royce O'Neal, Eric Gordon, Josh Okogie. They probably won't re-sign Drew Eubanks, but those are free agents. And they've got a Kevin Durant extension to consider coming up. And like, They don't got a lot to like. That's a very interesting team who had a disappointing season and has to figure this out. At least they're not in that situation.
And this is what I've been trying to say, because that's why you want to stay under the second apron. And if you are trading for a third guy with a big contract, think Jeremy Grant, think Wiggins even, man, you better hope that works. Because if that doesn't work, you are in some trouble. And those are two guys right there that if it doesn't work for you, you're stuck with that, because no other team, whatever team trades for one of those two guys right now, is going to be please, let's hope that we find something here, or else we will be stuck with this.
Couple of names, like if you're just going to go for free agents, these names are not good. They're not great because remember, you only have like $5 million if you do end up going that direction. Two names that came up that I was like, all right, who made like $5 million last year? Who could? Taurean Prince and Russell Westbrook. Those are the only two names I kind of came up with.
Well, I'm not going to lie to you. I would take Russ.
Russ is a very interesting name that we'll probably talk about later in the season, but like you need another offensive initiator. You need somebody that can eat some innings and eat some minutes. You're not playing him, Luka, and Kyrie together. You're not gonna do that. You're not expecting him to come in and solve those issues. But he's an innings eater that could help you in a couple ways. Bring some toughness. I know we don't like him after that playoff series, but he brings some of the stuff that you kind of need for a regular season.
You know what else I would do? One of the first things I think I would do is I would call Spencer Dinwiddie almost immediately and just be like, hey,
you would go. That's that minimum. One too. I didn't even think about. I didn't even mention him.
That minimum, that at least gives you somebody you feel somewhat comfortable with dribbling the basketball. Like, and again, a guy who won't need to start for you and might not even be in your rotation at points in time in the season. But if it's like your 13th guy, that's whenever you start to. Just saw a hilarious tweet. Sorry, I need to stop scrolling Twitter. That's whenever that's what you want to do when you're team building. You want to have depth and you want to have people who can do things and not be super one-dimensional. So I would call Dinwiddie. Mario Hezonja.
You think Dinwiddie wants to come back to Mama?
I think if the Mavericks called his phone, he'd answer for sure.
Mama. You remember Mama's the whole thing where he's like, "Well, you don't want to go to Mom when you get beat down. You want to go to Dad and try a new challenge." And I was like, "Okay."
Guess what? Daddy beat him up. And now Mama's here with her arms wide open.
Mom got the promotion. Mom's doing great. Mom just bought a new house. Dad's out on the street trying to figure.
Stepdad's a banker.
But dad just has a new girlfriend and she has a podcast. She has a podcast. So
she's not a podcaster.
I'm losing the metaphor here. Couple of trade targets that I just looked through some. So I mentioned Brandon Ingram earlier. You don't like that one?
Absolutely not. I can't get that Team USA stuff out of my head because he'd be the third guy here easily. Like he cannot play off ball. I don't want that.
But that's the thing is you want him to play on ball a little bit. But yeah, he had a hard time playing off ball. He's also 1 year, so $36 million, and he wants an extension and wants to get paid a bunch.
In $40 million a year there.
I mentioned Brandon Ingram because he may not cost that much, and maybe it takes a Luka and Kyrie to show him like, hey, you've got to be able to play off the ball, and maybe that helps him, but it may not take that much to get him. You mentioned Jeremy Grant. He's actually making $30 million, which I thought was a lot more.
It's just the 5 years for Jeremy Grant. That was the shocking bit of his contract.
It's long. So he's making 29.7 this upcoming year, 32 the year after that, 34 the year after that, 36. So it's only 4 years, but the player option on the last year.
Yeah.
That cap's going to keep going up. They just got that new deal is coming in. The cap's going to keep going up. That's not going to look as bad later. But what does he fix for you? He definitely adds some shooting, adds some more size, but he doesn't rebound that well for his size. He has been a good defender in the past, but has not really necessarily shown that recently. So if it's Luka, Kyrie, PJ, Jeremy Grant, Lively, or Gafford, then you're like, okay, who's your issue you mentioned earlier? Who's guarding point of attack?
I'd be very interested in Jeremy Grant because the thing with him that I'll throw him some bail for, as opposed to a guy like Brandon Ingram, is obviously Brandon Ingram's a better basketball player than Jeremy Grant is. Right. But we've seen Jeremy Grant on the Nuggets, a team that was trying to win at the highest level, be a very, very, very good role player. And he's been on bad teams now for like the last 5 or 6 years of his career. And the thing that would concern me a little bit there is from everything he says, he's like, that's what he kind of wants to be. Like he was pretty open about that in Detroit, that he wanted to be the guy. And it didn't like, I'm not quoting him directly, but it didn't necessarily matter if they were winning a lot of games. Like he just wanted to, do his thing.
Him and Kuzma flying in the same.
Yeah, exactly. And, the Trailblazers traded for him. They were trying to win, and then Dame left, and they were terrible, and then they dealt with a bunch of injuries. I would be interested in Jeremy Grant because he gives you an on-ball creator who your stars aren't playing. Okay, he can score 25 points. He can do that. And he can play off-ball. But then you do have the point of attack problem.
Yeah.
It'd have to be one of him or PJ.
Somebody that would fix the point of attack problem, but would maybe give you issues other places. That's kind of like a sneaky name. What about Marcus Smart? Memphis.
Oh, I hadn't thought about him. I've been seeing a lot of trade stuff with him.
Fixes your point of attack. He's kind of a guy that can initiate a little bit. Now, the Celtics always wanted him to initiate more, and it never really panned out necessarily. But that's an interesting name. He's making $20 million, so it's right there where if you do what is it, Tim and Omax, throw those together. Maybe throw one more in there. Throw a Hardy in there if they're interested, and then the picks, and then maybe that's something that if Memphis needs another shooter, wants to go with the picks instead, retool.
That's interesting. Bring him home. I hadn't thought about that.
Bring him home. That was an interesting.
Am I trash for not wanting to trade Omax? Like I don't want to be one of those fans, but I really don't want to trade him.
You're yourself. You're slightly biased.
Okay. Well, because I'm just like, what value does Omax actually put in a trade?
Yeah.
Like, is Omax moving the needle for a team? That might change things. But if it's just Omax for salary, I'm like, ooh, I don't like that.
Yeah, I'd rather do something else.
The dog didn't like that either.
No. What's up, dog? My last name is Bruce Brown.
He's just so small.
I know, but you can play him with Luka and Kyrie. He kind of gives you a little point of attack, kind of gives you a little initiating, kind of gives you a little bit here and there. Like he just fills in holes. And we kind of hope that Josh Green would grow into that. And I don't know that we've seen that, the ball handling and like the attacking necessarily. But yeah, Bruce Brown making $23 million. Might not cost that much anymore.
Man, it was his past season was very discouraging for me.
Twas.
And he was good with Brooklyn and stuff. But the Nuggets GM, when afterwards, he was like, yeah, I mean, Bruce Brown, we made Bruce Brown basically. And I mean, they weren't.
Hey, can the Mavs make him? Can the Mavs make him too?
Yeah, true. What about another name? And this is the name that I was not interested in at all at the trade deadline. But now that things have changed, I'm back. I'm in on, and it to me is maybe the most reasonable, most realistic one, and the highest ceiling by a lot. Wiggins.
I have him down too. He's making $26 million. And so his cost probably really down.
I think you could get stuff for taking on Wiggins.
Probably, yeah, because he's got a couple more years left.
Because if I was making trades where it's like they could get Tim, that's an expiring contract for them that they can maybe even flip to somebody if they really wanted to. Right. Like you could provide them huge salary cap relief, which is something that they desperately need.
Yep.
And if Wiggins needs another change of scenery and you somehow tap into 2022 Wiggins, this team would be disgustingly good.
Yeah, they would. It would be like you'd look at like what the Celtics have, or it would be. I guess it would be closer to what the Nuggets have, where you're like, oh my gosh, they have these two stars, plus they have Porter Jr., plus they have Wiggins. Yeah. It would be like that.
But if it's Wiggins
he's an interesting name.
If it's the Wiggins of 8/10 of his career, then you're stuck with that contract. Nobody is going to bail you out of that one.
No, which is what we're assuming the Warriors right now. But yeah, if you could get something for him, that's an interesting name. I had him written down too. Let us know in the comment section what should be the Mavericks' biggest priority. What kind of names are you interested in? Go check out Slightly Biased on YouTube. And we'll be back with more stuff all throughout the offseason. We'll be breaking it down. Guys, thanks for listening to Locked on Mavs.
Peace out. We're not getting wire marketing, guys.